I just pulled a bookmark out of the book I'm going to read from this morning. Uh, Today is National Good Samaritan Day. I know it sounds trite and everything else, but it was established in the United States anyway, about 20 years ago, I think, uh, in honor of someone who was murdered kind of in public, I believe in New York City. And as they were getting themselves beat up, there were passers-by that didn't get involved. Okay, multiple passers-by. I'm going to take the phone off the hook here, and the person died. And forgive me if I don't recall the name or have the name here. But anyway, and it just occurred to me, this has nothing to do with today's little talk, but it just occurred to me that Samaria in first century time included the area that we now call Palestine. And the Samaritans were not, their religion and their social status was not sort of Orthodox Jew. And so the establishment in Jerusalem, which was then under Roman occupation, it was Roman arms that kept the order there. They looked down on the Samaritans as second or third or fourth class citizens, if citizens at all. So the use of the example of a Samaritan that did this act of compassion, where the priest and the merchant and the politician all ignored this poor fellow on the side of the road. But it was the Samaritan that dressed his wounds, picked him up, put him on his own donkey, and carried him to a motel, paid for the room for a few days, and told the motel owner that give him whatever he needs. When I come back, I'll even pay for that. Yeah. Well, anyway, it just occurred to me the many parallels of modern times and today's news in the same location with similar plots. And anyway, there's that. I want to talk briefly this morning. We've got friends coming up from Southern California this morning about Enochian Magick, briefly, and that it's a personal thing, okay? Because we're Constance getting the living room all beautified because we might be starting up a class here in the foreseeable future. And it'll probably, one of them anyway, will be centered around Enochian Magick. Enochian Magick is a personal thing. Okay, even when we do exercises and things like that in a group, we'll scry, you have group scrying sessions and everything else. But the individual magic of Enochian Magick are visions that take place in the individual. That's what it's meant to do. And so it's a little bit different than, well, it's quite a bit different than, let's say, Solomonic magic, where you kind of externalize what you want done in the material world. It's sort of down and dirty, something you want a manifested reaction on the material plane, you know. Enochian magic is a little different. It's not that you can't change things in the material world by means of Enochian magic, but it's not direct in the same way. You don't move stuff around with Enochian magic. You inspire, activate, stimulate, traumatize yourself internally, and it's you that would eventually affect the change in the world around you. In the Enochian Vision Magic, which will probably be the text, well, it will be the text of an Enochian class that, should we do it here. I want to read an example of a young woman. I'm assuming she's a young woman that attended a public workshop out of town back in 2006. So it was a whole workshop, and sort of the climax of the workshop is that we all scry the 30th aether. It's just the closest aether to the material plane. If you're dozing off right now, listening to me talk, you might be dozing in and out of drifting in and out of text right now. Okay, but to stress the point that it's a personal thing, I've included this as an example because it's a good one. It was a public lecture, July 22nd, 2006, 30th Aether Tex. The scryer her name is withheld. The following is a letter I received a few days after I returned home from a workshop series on Enochian Vision Magic. The vision the young woman describes occurred during a scrying session that concluded a half-day public workshop. She, like most of the attendees at this event, had never performed Enochian magic before. After I had outlined a brief history of Dee and Kelly's adventures and the fundamentals of Enochian magic, the entire class took part in the ritual and chanting of the ring, lamen, holy table, sigillum, and table of Nelvich in the opening ceremony, which is all outlined in this book. Over their two-part chorus of the table of Nelvich words, I recited the 19th call to penetrate the 30th Aether text. So in other words, the penultimate section of this ritual, after we've opened up the holy table and everything, is that the group is split up into two voices because there's two things going on in the table of Nelvich. And one group goes Lua Lang Sachers, and the second voice goes Yad Nam Zad, or Yad Mazir, Yad Ser Os, etc. And they do it together. And after 6 or 7 rounds of that, the room is just high as a kite. And while everybody's high as a kite, then I recite Madrias dies Pravtex, Kis Mikael, Senior Kaos. Then I do the call. Okay. It does establish an atmosphere in the room, as you might imagine. Okay, here's the letter. Let me cut to the chase. Thanks again for making the trek here last weekend. I learned a lot more than I expected to, which is why I'm writing you this. I didn't get a chance to talk to you about things I saw or did when you led the class foray into the Enochian Aethers. And initially I was hesitant, too, because of a rather personal nature of some of it. But after talking to my brother about it, and I'm not sure if that's a lodge brother or her brother, I don't know, I realized I should tell you. In fact, he insisted I do so. So here goes. We had just finished chanting the Holy Table, and you indicated we should close our eyes while you continued chanting and just followed the images that came to us. Initially, I got no images per se, but random geometric shapes in dark shades of purple and green, mostly pyramids and pyramids of one color in front of the squares of a slightly darker shade. And that's very common to get geometric things like that. I realized that I was falling forward, swiftly down a triangular corridor filled with a dark purplish haze, with occasional lighter purple flashes, like falling through layers and layers and layers, whoosh, 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 with something spinning all around me at the same time. Then I realized I wasn't going down anymore, but rising, still through this triangular purple infused corridor, whoosh, 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 still spinning, and I began to feel my heart pounding like it would burst inside me. I felt dizzy and slightly nauseous. And just when I thought I couldn't stand it for another moment longer, I stopped, speeding forward, and the purple mist cleared, and I was standing on a grassy plain, almost a hilltop, that rose slightly up in front of me. I realized that the thing that had been spinning seemed to be the petals of an enormous flower, a lotus perhaps, and that the hillside on which I stood contained within its perimeter like a low wall going around it. It occurred to me now that I was facing north. Beyond the border of the wall were two more hills at a distance, one to the left and one to the right, covered with vibrant dark green vegetation. And I knew vaguely that there were things in those hills, those trees, but I didn't have time to think about them. There were 4 pillars that stretched up around me at the outside edge of the wall. And as I watched, a pyramid rose up out of the hillside in front of me. Or perhaps I simply moved swiftly up the hillside toward it. It wasn't large, maybe only 1.5 stories high. It was 4-sided and made of a smooth golden brick or stone. A blinding light issued from the center of it, and as I watched, the form of a person appeared in the center of this light and was walking toward me. My impression was that he came from inside the pyramid, and he seemed to be coming from some distance, though the pyramid was just in front of me. He was tall and blond and blue-eyed and wore a garment of brilliant white and a golden circlet about his temples. He was smiling, and he was so glad to see me. As he came close to me, he opened up the robe to reveal a column of blinding white light running down the center line of his body. As my eyes adjusted to the light, I realized that the light was coming from his chakras, which were blazing yellow-white light and shaped sort of like flowers. I realized that my chakras were also blazing in the light from his heart chakra, leapt forward in a thin, white-yellow tongue of flaming light that entered my heart chakra. Then his throat chakra flamed and leapt into mine. And then all of them at once seemed to, and that blazing sharing of chakra light continued for a few blissful, amazing moments. He held his hands out in front of me, palms facing toward me, and I placed my palms against them. And the chakras in our hands blazed with light and fire for a moment. Then he took my hands and pulled them straight into his chest so that I held his heart chakra in my hands. And then he indicated that I should put his heart chakra in my chest. I was amazed that he would suggest that and slightly hesitant, but he insisted, and together we thrust it into my chest. I was stunned at the force of the heat of the union of our two heart chakras. Then he gestured to his throat chakra, and again I took his chakra in my hands and lifted it out of him and into myself with another flash of heat. Then I lifted out of his third eye chakra, then his solar plexus chakra, then his hara chakra. I reached next for his root chakra and realized that in my hands it had become a huge golden phallus. And that, as curious as logic of dreams are, there was only one obvious way to integrate that into myself. I mounted it. And at the same time, I reached up and removed the crown from his head, symbolic of his crown chakra, and placed it on my own head at the same moment as the phallus slid into me. And the universe exploded. It wasn't sex. It wasn't copulation. It was union. I was perfectly with and within him, and he was perfectly with and within me. It was bliss. It was light. It was perfection. I heard his voice in my ear saying, "You are she in whom all things are received, she in whom all things are created, she in whom all things are possible. All life is yes. All life is no, K-N-O-W. Know that you are she," unquote. At about that moment, I heard your voice saying something about looking around for landmarks that would help me remember this place. And I laughed to myself that I wasn't likely to forget this. You said something else about bringing back a sign or a key or a talisman from this place, something I know and remember it by that could help me return. And I pulled back slightly from his being with a wordless question, and his answer was to withdraw from me, and he ejaculated into my outstretched hands a liquid golden light that turned into two glowing golden diamond crystals that sank into my palms and disappeared as I watched. Then your voice said it was time to return, and without another word or glance between us, I was whisked up and away, coming back into awareness of my body with a nauseating thud, my head spinning, my heart pounding painfully. You started asking us questions about what we'd seen and where we'd been, and I was too nauseated and out of breath to answer, but was amazed to hear my classmates describing similar imagery, lotuses, columns, towers, pyramids, though no one else seemed to have experienced anything close to what had just passed between me and that other being. Or at least no one was admitting to it. I sat there in a haze, listening to them, thinking about my own experience and waiting for my heart to quit pounding, my stomach to stop churning. I must have looked pretty stunned because my husband just asked me if I was okay, And all I could initially articulate to him was, as he looked over at me, was, "What the fuck just happened to me?" We broke for dinner about that moment, and I realized my opportunity to share it with the class had passed. But I still wanted to tell you about it, and of course, my husband. We had driven separate cars that day, so we met at the house before going to the restaurant, and there at home I told him. He stared at me for a while as I told him about it, saying that was pretty amazing, but I'd better not say anything about it in front of the class as a whole. That was way too personal just to lay it out there. And I'm doing this keeping her completely anonymous too. So he suggested that I call my brother, that he'd been able to decode it for me and would definitely be interested. I agreed, but thought at the same time that I really should tell you. I wanted to do so in private. We went to dinner and then to meet and greet with the class, but I held back. There were always too many people around. Perhaps now, after reading my account, you understand my hesitancy, because to be honest, I wasn't sure how to begin. I was still unsure of myself, unsure how to confess to someone that I had only just met under his direction that I experienced a union that was way more sexual with someone who apparently was a being of light, a resident of the angelic realms, and also not sure of what that said about me. But I knew who would know what that all meant, so as soon as I got home on Sunday, I called my brother and told him the whole story. He was jubilant, congratulatory, awestruck, and then he asked me, "Well, what did Lon say when you told him?" I had to admit that I hadn't been sure of what or how to communicate it, and he had been further stymied by my husband's reaction to it. My brother was incredulous. How could I not have shared that vision with you, who of all people would understand and sympathize with my bewilderment at it? I should have told you everything, he insisted. I agreed and promised I would write you. And so here we are. And it goes on just a little bit more. But I thought I would share that with you. And again, I give several other examples in the back of Enochian Vision Magic. Ooh, I better put my precious Brianna Siri bookmark in. Okay, that's it for today. I know it might be a little short, but that should give you something to chew on. And until tomorrow, we're coming up on Thelemic Holy Days here. So there's, if you've got an equinox of the gods, you might want to check the chronology of events that were starting to take place here in late February, early March, and March and April, and sort of get yourself attuned to the rhythm of the high holy days of Thelema. Until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.